So going back to the growing up here in the US, what was your experience specifically growing up as a Hindu kid here? Did you come across Hinduphobia in those times?
I would say, so this was, I'm dating myself now, we're talking about the 70s and 80s. And so then it was either that nobody really knew about it. I mean, I guess in some new age places, not where I grew up, but maybe like new agey, West Coasty stuff, maybe there was some concept of yoga and spirituality, but not necessarily linked with Hinduism. But other than that, people were pretty clueless, except for really like grossly racist, like horrifyingly overt things that any reasonable and kind person would say, well, that doesn't seem very nice. And so in ways, yes, it existed. You had things like Indiana Jones coming out. You had, you know, all of these overtly exotifying tropes coming out. And at the same time, it wasn't as insidious. It was so overt that it was easy to point out. So yes, I certainly grew up with the most obvious aspects of Hinduism being mocked, but also because I grew up in a community that was, I grew up with a lot of Jewish people. And so there wasn't this sort of Christian normativity in the community that I grew up with. And there was an awareness that there is a dominant religion in the country and that other people are impacted by it. Yeah, so having grown up in New York, I think, you know, with our New York values, it sort of sheltered me from some of that, or it allowed me to talk about some of it, but certainly it was around. And then as I got older, and I expressly didn't study Hinduism in college because for me, it had always been very private. So because it was sort of overtly mocked and misunderstood in public spaces and in media and in school, I adopted a very private version of Hindu. I wasn't sort of publicly Hindu. I was privately Hindu, and it guided all of my choices, but it's not something I really talked about. And so when I went to college, it didn't seem like something that I would engage with academically. And so now we're talking about the early 90s. And I think that's when some of this very deep rooted Hinduphobia in academia started to take hold in a different way. So instead of it being these bad anthropologists mocking Hinduism, it became Hinduism itself needs to be deconstructed and dismantled, and it's bad. And so while I wasn't privy to that because I didn't study it, I soon became aware of it when I went out into the world after graduation. So it's changed form, I guess is my short answer.
Right. And so now do you think your children are having to deal with more Hinduphobia than you did, and shaming because of being Hindus? Are you seeing that?
So, you know, I talked to them about it, and they say that it doesn't really come up in school, and that their identities don't come up in school. But also their identities don't come up in school. And so they're very aware that there are these ideas being circulated in the media, popular ideas that seem to have some kind of cachet amongst people who want to do the right thing. People who identify as critical thinkers, as progressive, and, you know, and as a family, we very much do. And of course, we're operating with a completely different set of assumptions and information. Right. So it's not that we're against critical thinking or progressive thinking. We're just operating with a different set of assumptions.
Right.
And so I think they're tentative, you know, even with me as their mother, I think they're tentative with engaging in these conversations because there is so much narrative to unpack, and they're kids and they just kind of want to be kids. And so because the situation allows them to avoid it because they're not having to deal with stuff, they just kind of avoid it, which I kind of get. I mean, when you're a multiply minoritized teenager, you kind of just want to fit in.
Right.